Hello and welcome to Global Sources Live. My name's Tom and I'll be your host for this episode of Buyer Fireside Chat. Before we get stuck into that though, I should mention that this is a sort of promotional tie-in with the upcoming Sourcing Festival, an online event on globalsources.com, which will offer a whole lot of great sourcing deals, and you can click the link in the description to register for access to that. Now, we have three great guests lined up to talk to today, namely Carina McLeod of eCommerce Nurse. We also have Kevin Sanderson of Maximize eCommerce, and last but by no means least, David Hoffman of Global TQM. They'll be sharing their insights and maybe some tips and tricks and hacks even on how to make the most of your e-commerce listings, your marketing and sourcing strategies. With no further ado then, let's bring on our first guest. Okay, so our first guest today is Carina McLeod of eCommerce Nurse. Hi Carina, how are you doing?
Hi Tom, firstly thank you for the invite and great to be the first guest of the day. I'm doing really well, thank you.
Oh, that's good to hear. Where are you physically located as you call us today?
I'm actually based in the UK, just in Essex, just east of London.
Oh yeah, I know. I was about to say I know it well. I don't know it that well, but I'm familiar with its work. So that's great. So a bit earlier in the day for you than us. So appreciate you taking the time. So yeah, today we're talking about kind of e-commerce tips and tricks, and the clue is in the name, I guess, in your business, eCommerce Nurse. Can you give us a bit of background on that? Tell us how that all got started.
Yeah, definitely. So my background is very much e-commerce background. I've been in e-commerce for almost 20 years now. So my career started in buying, and I used to work at Amazon in vendor management. So I was at Amazon, and this is very, very long time ago, when Amazon was like one of those places that it was almost like, why would you work there type place when you're working in buying. So I started my career there in 2004 and worked across multiple product categories. And then in 2011, I left Amazon for just a bit of a break, but that break didn't end up. It wasn't a short break. I ended up consulting for vendors and sellers on Amazon. It was unknown to me that sellers and vendors needed that support when it came to Amazon. And so over the years of consulting, it just grew and grew and grew in terms of so many brands needing that help to understand Amazon because of the complexity and self-service of it all. And so for a number of years, I was consulting for brands. And then it got to a point where I couldn't scale anymore, and there was only one of me. And so that was the time when I needed to then set up an agency and start bringing on experts, because I was also saying that, yeah, I can do marketing, I can do X. And the truth of it is you start needing, as you bring solid brands on board, you need experts in marketing, you need experts in copywriting. And so that's really where eCommerce Nurse was born. So it started off very much as me sort of being a consultant for a number of years. And then eCommerce Nurse, the name came from just sort of being there to help people in the Amazon space and e-commerce space, because it can be quite complex for a large number of brands, especially for those brands that have come from a bricks and mortar background that are going through that digital transformation. So we've been going for a number of years. eCommerce Nurse in itself, we're an Amazon focused agency. We work with a range of brands. It can be established brands, household brands that you've all heard of, over to new up and coming brands. We're a growing team. We're getting up to about 20 of us, and we work with brands all over the globe. So very much the UK, Europe, North America, Emirates, Australia, Amazon's global. And so we provide that support, and it can be anything from account management, ads management, marketing, really all the different levers that you need to be able to grow your business on Amazon. We have that covered.
Fascinating. And do you find, it sounds like you're sort of working with very kind of large concerns, maybe some smaller ones in all different kinds of categories as well. Is there a sort of common denominator to some of the struggles or issues that they have kind of moving into selling online, into e-commerce?
Definitely. I mean, there's always, you've got your nuances at category level, but the common thing is if you're a brand that's moving over to e-commerce and you are an established brand, you're very well known, you might be in a lot of bricks and mortar. The biggest challenge then is that going digital with the imagery, with your product listings, really understanding the importance of investing in your product pages. As opposed to, in a store, you're putting a product on the shelf and the point of sale is very small. You don't really need to do as much. So it's trying to convert shopping down an aisle into a physical aisle, down into the digital aisle, and trying to change all of that. We deal with some other brands that have very much been born in the e-commerce world. And so actually they're really savvy to the e-commerce side of things, but they want to also use Amazon, for example, as a launch pad to go into other retailers. And then it's trying to get them to translate the digital aisle into how do you go into a physical store. So we see it from both angles, and it's really, really interesting, and it's just constantly evolving as well. So, a strategy or a challenge that you have one year might be very different to those for another year. So a lot of the biggest part is that educational piece.
Sure. And actually, I'd like to kind of concentrate, I guess, on the digital aisle today. And I think it's telling that you mentioned the product listing first up, because that's kind of both the first impression and also the more detailed look at any product that's online. What do you think are like the real fundamentals that you can't afford to get wrong when you're like designing or creating a product listing, in terms of, I mean, how it like is presented, in terms of like aesthetics, visuals, and in terms of the content that you put onto that page? How much is too much? What needs to be there? What shouldn't be there? What are the real key things that have to be in place to get successful conversions?
Yeah. So the key thing with anything when you're listing your product on, for example, on Amazon, but can be on e-commerce anyway, there's your overall objective, of course, is sales. But the two ways that you're going to get that is through conversion, as you mentioned, but also traffic. So if we use Amazon as an example, first off, to get conversion, you need to get the customers to actually find your product, to click on your product. And that is something that then, Amazon is a bit of a black hole. If you're listing a product for the first time, it gets lost. And so it's about, how do your product surface at the top of search results? And that is very much keyword driven. So the first step is all about getting your product discovered and understanding what are the keywords that you want your product to appear in search results for. And so there's a lot of research there that needs to be done in terms of understanding, what are the relevant keywords and what ones you want to incorporate in your content. There's this other piece then that you talked about, which was the conversion, as in, okay, you've got the customers coming to your product page. They're finding it when they're searching for very relevant keywords, but how do you then convert those pages? And that all then comes down to the copy. It comes down to having those product images that pop out on the page. And most importantly, it's basically thinking about the customer and trying to basically talk to the customer as opposed to tell the customer about your products. And what I mean by that is we see so many brands highlighting what they believe is great about their product, but it doesn't actually make sense necessarily to the customer. And so it's about speaking the way the customer wants to hear it. And this is where Amazon is a great platform for this, because you've got customer questions, you've got customer reviews. So the real key part to any of this is all the research. So as I mentioned, you've got this keyword research, but you've also got on product page research, where you start understanding, okay, the customer's talking about this about our product. We didn't realize that was really important. Or the customer is asking these questions. Okay, that needs to be incorporated in the content. And if you're new, and I'm talking about like if you've got an existing product page that you want to improve and optimize, if you don't have that, it's about looking at the competition. What are competitors? What are they talking about in their product pages? What are the questions that customers are asking? So those are the key things. And it's just making sure that you're highlighting your USPs. And the thing is with the customer these days, it's a scan and scroll culture that we've developed. The customer doesn't want to read through loads of text, but at the same time, you kind of need some of the text there if they have that question. And so what we're finding now is really working the best is that mix of really well written, optimized content that's keyword rich, but it's enticing and answers the customer questions. And, it's appealing to read, but also starting to bring text onto the images. So instead of having just plain images, it's all about highlighting your USPs in icons on your product images. You're basically creating these infographics for those that don't want to read through everything and just want to scan and scroll and just see the key highlights about a product. So those are the two areas that we're really seeing, and we're investing a lot more these days for brands on infographics.
Oh, that's fascinating. What's the kind of do you have a sort of rule of thumb for like a percentage coverage of a given image, or like how long the tagline should be on a certain product picture, anything like that?
Not necessarily. I mean, we have guidelines that we provide brands in terms of the sizing of the font, because if you put a huge amount of text on the font, you've got huge amount of text on the image. You've got to think about the mobile user. Now, more customers are going to be buying on their phone or on their tablet than they are on desktop. So we sit here and we do all the work. This always makes me smile because we're doing everything on desktop. So we're constantly looking at desktop, but it's like that's not what the customer's looking at. You need to then think about that user experience using mobile. And for that, the images are going to be so much smaller. And so you really need to have a small piece of text, sentence, bullet points. That's it. Not a huge amount of text, because otherwise the customer can't read it, and it needs to be really clear for them. Otherwise, they're going to be distracted and go elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as you have to pinch and zoom, you're gone, right? Probably.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, and does that carry through to the body text as well? Do you sort of have to look at a lot? Are you going a bit bullet point heavy in the descriptions in more detail, or is that a bit more freeform and kind of based on your brand voice?
Yeah, so if we're using Amazon as a platform, a lot of it is about having text, utilizing that space from a keyword perspective. But what we're finding is we also do A/B testing to understand, well, okay, that's great to use as much space for keywords, but how many of those keywords are relevant? How many keywords can you have in the back end? How many need to be in the front end? And actually, if we're talking about this scan and scroll, do the customers want to read through all of this content? And that's where you often see the start of a bullet point calling out the key features, and then it goes into explaining it in more detail. So it's easy for the customer to visualize what are the key points like.
Oh, just frozen for me, Joe. Can you hear?
Oh yeah, it's frozen for me as well.
Oh, okay.
I guess we'll wait for
give her a sec.
short while.
Yeah.
We are back.
Ah, you're back. Oh, it's a shame you were halfway through a really good answer there. Let's we'll edit that in post. Sorry. So you're talking about I got as far as putting up the key elements in the front of a bullet point, and then kind of going into more detail afterwards.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think.
Sorry, resume.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Yeah. Okay. I'll see how we can go from here.
I'll tell you what. Well, let's. I can bring it back in. So I just. Sorry, we lost you there for a bit. You were just saying about, or that I could hear about, kind of starting with the highlights at the front of a bullet point and then going into more detail. So are we looking at the kind of a model of a sort of cascading level of information. So if someone wants to read more about a particular point, they do, and if not, they just keep moving. Is that sort of the idea?
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly it. So, and that's what you're trying to do. You're writing content for all customers, and you can't assume that every customer reads the content in the same way, or wants information in the same way, or is shopping at that moment in time in that same way. Sometimes a customer might be browsing. Sometimes a customer is really wanting those answers there. And again, it depends on the product. Some impulse purchase products, low cost CPG products, you're not going to need to go into that immense detail. But if you're selling an electronics product or an innovative product the customer's never heard of, or a product with a high price point, you're going to obviously have to go into a lot more detail, and there'll be a lot more text to go into detail as well to do that. With things such as the title, we always have this that I always see these debates out there, as in make the most of all your characters in a title. I think the key thing here is, does it highlight what the product is? So when the customer's scrolling through search results, they can immediately see what it is. Does it have those major keywords in, which are the keywords that you want the product to surface for? But most important, that the customer can see, oh, that's what I'm looking for, and it's in the title. And that the title is appealing. And I think we get so focused on how many characters, as opposed to the kind of core reasons why we want the title to be as it should. So those are what I always say. Now, we've actually done A/B tests and on a number of our clients' products, and we actually find that it is actually shorter titles that customers are looking for. You know, I know for one, when I read a product title, I probably read the first 5 words anyway. I don't go into the detail. So it's always thinking about that. And I always say, is a really key tip, is always thinking about the customer. And so when you're doing anything, like I mentioned about the mobile, always think, well, I'm a customer. I shop on Amazon. I shop online all the time. Would I buy this if it was written like this, etc.? And that's something that's really, really important.
Yeah, put yourself in their shoes, I suppose.
Completely.
Yeah, actually, just to round this off, actually, I'm always curious about this kind of question with sort of other areas of sourcing and industry as well. But is this a kind of a common mistake that you see people making, where they have, I mean, again, in sort of product listings and approaches to SEO, things they think are a really good idea, but are in fact kind of a big mistake?
Couple of things. There's the keyword stuffing, where just the title is just so keyword focused. You know that there's their objective, but the customer isn't in mind. They're not thinking about how the customer will read it, what is going to be enticing. So that's a big thing that we see. The other thing is what we talked about, the word count, or I mentioned about the word count, as in I look at the first few words. What that often means is a lot of brands remove their brand name from the start of the title and don't have that. But what that does is it muddles the products even more, because the branding is so important. And I could do a whole call and going into the importance of branding. Yeah. But if you want to stand out from the competition, and let's say if we're using Amazon as an example, it's pretty saturated in a lot of categories, you need your product to stand out. So if your product doesn't have, if you're not creating a brand and have your brand name highlighted there, your product looks like everybody else's. If you then put a high price tag on it and you haven't got a brand name on it, why is a customer going to go and purchase your product over another? It's all about giving off that premium vibe. So one thing I would always say is, first off, you need to have a strong brand name in any case. Just having a couple of letters or something like an acronym or something that doesn't really mean much isn't going to help. But a strong brand name, and really putting that because in your title and highlighting that, because that gives off that you are a loyal brand. You're not a loyal brand. You are a solid brand. And and often can help from a premium aspect as well, as long as you cover off all the other areas that would mean your product will come off as premium in terms of your images and just the overall quality of your product.
Yeah, all right. We're definitely going to have to maybe come back and talk about branding in some future time, I think. Yeah, thanks very much, Carina. Actually, and if people want to kind of get in touch with you or eCommerce Nurse as a whole? How do they find you?
Yeah, definitely. So if you want to know how we can support you on your Amazon journey, whether it be through account management, ads management, or just what we were talking about in terms of listing optimization, we can do all of that. We do A+ pages, we do brand store, we do all the copywriting, the design, we can do photography, we can do everything sort of A to Z on your product listing. If you go to ecommercenurse.com and just go to contact us and fill in our contact us form, somebody will come back to you within the team. Or alternatively, if you want to drop us an email, just email us at hello@ecommercenurse.com and somebody will be able to reach out and get a discovery call in and just understand more about how we can support you.
All right, fantastic. Thanks very much again for your time and insights, Carina. And hope to talk to you again sometime about branding and other matters.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you everyone for listening.
All right, so our next guest today is from Global TQM and here to talk about, issues with logistics and getting things from one place to another, and that is David Hoffman. And let's see if we can bring him on now. Hi, David. How are you doing?
Good, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time. Where are you calling us from, actually?
So I'm in Sydney, Australia, and it's about nearly 8 p.m. tonight.
Oh, right. You're working late for us. I appreciate that. So thank you.
No problem at all. You're welcome.
All right, fantastic. All right. So, before we get into the nitty-gritty of our discussion topic, could you tell us a bit about yourself, maybe, and about Global TQM? Give us a bit of a backgrounder on what you do.
Yeah, sure. So Tom, I live in Australia now. I lived in Hong Kong and China for 19 years before coming out here a year ago. We have a sourcing and quality control office in Shenzhen, and we've been developing products, sourcing suppliers for many years. That's what we do. And we help a lot of e-com sellers and a lot of small entrepreneurs of all sizes, including big retailers, find reliable suppliers, develop products, source products, and handle the whole supply chain for them. And I guess really, what's different about us is it's from all different sizes. If you're a small startup to, a seasoned, experienced seller, we've got a whole team on the ground in China that can help. And we really make sure that you have a direct relationship with the manufacturers. And we just help you build that and nurture that rather than try act as a middleman in between that.
That sounds pretty good. I suppose it makes sense to start with that, the upstream part of the e-commerce process, finding manufacturers, finding the people who are going to provide the products that you then go on and sell.
Yes.
Especially if you're like a sole trader, someone who's maybe starting out and doesn't have, huge amounts of capacity to you can't fly out to go look at factories and so on. What are some kind of things you should bear in mind when you're starting out researching about potential suppliers? What for example, are some red flags you should watch out for in the sort of early days, so to speak?
Yeah. So Tom, I think, the typical way to go about it if you're not traveling would probably be online through, all these websites like China, global sources, Alibaba, etc., etc. There's a lot of access to suppliers. I think some red flags to look out for is suppliers aren't always what they appear to be. You got to try and figure out who the real manufacturers are or who the trading companies are. Not that either are good or bad. Both have their place, but you just really need to know who you're dealing with. And I just think some red flags probably to me are when they're too willing to do anything or they're quoting prices that are too cheap. It's often unrealistic. So I would just say don't let price be the first judge of whether or not you want to pursue a supplier, number one. And number two, really, take the time to go deep, to get to know the people and communicate with them. I think, communication's key. And if you can't communicate well, that's really the first red flag. And then, there's a whole ladder of things, a checklist, I kind of mentally go through in dealing with the supplier to establish, their credibility.
Oh yeah, what are some of the things on your checklist?
Okay, yeah. So firstly, capacity. I always like to understand, what is their actual production capacity? Can they make our orders? And not just actually, in that our orders might be so big, or somebody's order might be so big, can they handle it? It's sometimes, are they the right size manufacturer for you? If you're starting and your quantities are smaller, you don't necessarily want to be working with the big manufacturers because they probably won't give you the attention you need. So it's really it's finding the fit for where you're at. I think that's really important.
Yeah, you want to be one of the bigger customers they have, right? Like not just
exactly, or at least be of a size that they're willing to take your order and don't find it more of an annoyance than anything else, because you'll just get pushed down the line and you won't get the attention.
Sure. I mean, sorry, go ahead. What I feel like you had another checklist item you've had to launch into.
I mean, there's a lot, so I do think whether it's large or small, you want to understand the size and capability of that manufacturer. Communication is always at top of my list. And the things I'm looking for there are the skills, not just their ability to speak English or converse, but it's really what are their skills? Are they educating me about a product, about the production process, and are they knowledgeable? Because if they're not, there's a good chance they're either not the manufacturer or possibly just a low quality manufacturer. You almost want that communication to be so fluid that they can talk you through their quality, which is the next major thing to understand. And that is, how do they check their quality? What processes do they have in place? What is their philosophy as a company on quality? What are their expected return rates? How do they deal with market feedback? All those questions will help you build confidence in the company. Obviously you get things like certifications. Are they experienced in your country? Do they have the certifications you need on your product? That's important. It's not uncommon for a manufacturer to say, yeah, we can make it for Australia, for example. But if they haven't actually shipped to Australia, it's more of a willingness to do it than actually understanding things that you might not even know. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not to say that, just because someone is making something for Australia for the first time, that's a bad thing in itself. But you need to know that in advance, that you can't assume that they have everything under control when it comes to their shipping. Maybe you need to kind of help them out with some things. And yeah, I guess you could well be willing to do that bit of helping out. But yeah, you're right. And I guess there's that issue of sort of, I suppose, being a little bit vulnerable. Is that part of it? Like when they can admit things they don't know about. Is it in a way kind of a sign of
that's actually a good way to, that's a really good way to put it. It's vulnerable and honest. If they don't know something, to say that, it's far more important, because ultimately, and I see this so often, where a buyer will expect the factory to be responsible for everything, which of course isn't an ideal world. We'd all love that, but it does ultimately come down to you as the buyer, because you're going to suffer the losses, you're going to suffer the reputation loss. So it's really important that you take that ownership, and having a supplier that's trustworthy and honest and transparent with those things really makes a big difference. And you giving them that comfort to do that, by the way, because I think if you create a tone where they're too scared to tell you, oh, we don't have this, or we don't have that, or we need to get it still, there's going to be a delay, you start getting funny stories, and you'd rather have honesty from the beginning. Yeah,
that's a really good point. Yeah, you don't want them to be kind of doing that thing. I mean, yeah, you do hear those stories where, because a supplier is trying to kind of solve the problem before they have to tell them about it, the buyer about it, then they end up kind of leaving it to really the last minute when it's too late to kind of even mitigate the issue of like a missed order or shipment or something.
Exactly. And then that's when you really get into the real risk territory of them doing something, to taking shortcuts, or doing something you might not be aware of. So it's much better to set the tone, such that they understand you'd rather work through problems with them and solve it together. But it's critical that you validate everything along the way.
Yeah, because those problems that you don't know about, they're going to have downstream effects for you. Once you're shipping things out of the warehouse in wait, now I need to think of some Australian cities, in Newcastle to to some shops around the New South Wales area. There you go. That's some Aussie geography.
You did well.
Yeah, and then you're blissfully assuming that those boxes are full of products that are fine, but then the customers get them and they're going to be pretty upset, which I suppose actually, especially for e-commerce buyers, that's another thing to think about. The kind of the fulfillment from the point of purchase out to the customers, whether they're retailers or individuals. I mean, what do you find as some sort of kind of pitfalls for e-commerce sellers in particular? There are kind of traps that would be easy to avoid if you knew about them, that happen a lot.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the e-commerce fulfillment side, I think people sometimes underestimate the experience the customer has when they receive a product. And that's, for example, simple things like the packaging and the whole unboxing experience. That's your first impression. And I know personally, when I buy stuff online, when it comes really poorly packaged, the first thing I think is, oh, this is cheap Chinese product. Where did they buy this from? Is it even good? When it comes really nicely packaged, with little customized message cards or just a bit of thought behind it, I naturally feel like, oh, these guys care about what they do, because they even care about the packaging. And when I receive it and it's nice and I enjoy unboxing it, I'm already biased towards liking the product and wanting to enjoy the product. One of the things I find as well that's really important is that's often overlooked is unboxing the product is actually your first opportunity to communicate directly with the customer. And that's really a powerful point, a powerful moment, because if there's anything you want them to know, for example, hey, if you've got any problem at all with this product, call us or live chat with us or whatever, we will solve it within 12 hours, for example. That's great to know, because already you're starting off on the right foot. Whereas I've seen products you arrive in, there's a long-winded instruction manual, and that message is there somewhere embedded in the instruction manual. And you go, well, probably 2% of people read that. Whereas one simple, clear message will completely transform your relationship, and it'll bring down your returns, and give you that customer service that people want. So, that customization, that messaging is really critical. One of the other things that I just mention is, and I've personally been through this experience when I shop online, is partnering with the right logistics partners is crucial. I actually bought something from the US. I was so excited to get this product. As it turns out, the product is phenomenal, but it took me nearly 2 months to get it because it was routed all over the place. And the company was good, they were helpful, but they admitted there's nothing they can do. It's gone out, they've got a tracking number. The problem was the logistics company they were using were looking for the cheapest rate and routing it all over. Whereas if they just paid a bit more or had a better partner, that nearly turned me off. I actually demanded a refund, to be honest, after a month, even though I hadn't got the product. And they didn't do it, but I could understand why. But it was frustrating. It put me off.
Yeah. I mean, because like you say, there's even something as simple as the little card inside a box. I mean, it's a cost-effective way to win over the customer, isn't it? You feel it does work. It's so simple, but it absolutely works. And then that a 2-month delay, that's the opposite. You already resent it by the time it arrives. Right? So
Exactly.
It's a lot of work to get over. I mean, what are some ways you can avoid? What's a red flag for a logistics agency? Is it a too good to be true price? Is that kind of red flag number one?
I think it's experience, being able to quote definite delivery times and lead times. When the ranges are too wide, it's generally not a good thing. I think if they've got too many partnerships, sometimes that happens, especially if it's global shipping. You'll find sometimes they go, oh, well, we use this service for this country, this service for another country. If there's too many links in the chain, it's probably a red flag. Or if they can't give you rates straight away, it's definitely a red flag, because you'll find they're probably not shipping regularly to those countries. So I would, it's just like, look for the guys that are doing the volumes in those places, because they've got the infrastructure. And even if they're a little bit more expensive, I would go with that safety any day.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's pretty negative for this. Is there any kind of pro to using the smaller kind of delivery agency, or you think not really? You should kind of go with the bigger ones whenever you can.
Yeah, I think it's normally price. You go for the smaller guys, and that's where they try to compete. I'm not sure that's a bad thing. I just think reputation and experience is more important. You maybe try a new delivery service with some orders, but not all orders. And as they prove themselves, or if they've got clients they use that you can talk to and try and verify things, that might be helpful. But of course, tracking information as well. You want to be able to track it. I know that costs more usually, but it really does make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's a customer service thing as well. I mean, I know when I order stuff that's online, I start to get, I don't know if it's really a negative perception, but it's certainly, I'm kind of in limbo until it arrives, when sometimes the package goes into a tracking black hole. It gets to California, and then it gets on a plane, and it says, well, now we don't know. And you think,
Exactly. And if you think about it, you own your whole customer experience, from when they're shopping, to the descriptions they're seeing, to the product images, to your accuracy of inventory, that you can buy it and get it delivered on time. And even when they receive the product off sale, so you own everything. But in that whole customer journey, there's this third party weak link that nobody says, oh, well, that wasn't your problem. That was your logistics company's problem. They just go, you guys are terrible on delivery, right? It's like this little weak link in that whole customer experience that can just, really hurt and damage your reputation.
Yeah, you got to watch for that. Well, I tell you, let's bring this back to a happier kind of topic. I want to come back and kind of talk about customized packaging a bit and making people feel good and not bad. Is that something that is you typically find that suppliers will kind of arrange as part of a customized order, or is it more practical to go to like a specialist kind of packaging provider and get them to kind of hook up with your supplier?
No, I think well, look, it depends. If you're doing a bulk order out of China, you can definitely include, message cards in there that are a little bit more generic, maybe not addressed to the person, for example. But you can definitely make sure all the boxing and packaging materials are done at the manufacturing level, for sure. So you've got less handling later. But if you want to really customize something, it's probably got to be done at your pick and pack center, where you might be handwriting a card, or you might be even printing a personalized card with each order, and they inserting it with the bundle. It's just you just got to look at it. Or if it's a very customized product you're printing on, that's normally a secondary process, right, which is done in your local country at the logistics center.
Okay, so I kind of get it. Oh God, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh no, that was it. I was saying, so like the principle of like do it as early on in the process as you can, but not too early. Like
exactly. Because remember, you got volume and bulk versus personalized something one-on-one. They're quite different. Unless you're lucky enough to have a supplier in China that's drop shipping for you, and can do that personalization, but normally you need a little bit more scale for that.
Yeah, I could imagine that's that's the point at which you definitely need to be among the top clients for that supplier, isn't it, to get that kind of attention?
Absolutely. You probably got to put one of your own people there to manage that.
Oh yeah, that's a interesting thought. Although I think perhaps outside the scope of this discussion. Anyway, so David, yeah, top tips as ever. Thank you for that. If people want to get in touch with you or Global TQM, how do they do that?
Yeah, really easy. Just go to globaltqm.com, and on our website there's a schedule a discovery call, and that's free, and they can talk to me or my team, and we can discuss their scenario. We love to talk to people.
All right, fantastic. Well, David, thank you very much for your time. It's been lovely chatting to you, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Likewise, Tom. Thank you so much.
All right, cheers. Goodbye.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, so next up, we are going to be talking to an expert in the realms of e-commerce and setting up online selling and so on. And that is none other than Kevin Sanderson of Maximizing eCommerce. Let's see if we can get him onto the screen. There we are. Kevin, hello. Can you hear me?
Hello, here I am.
Yes. Hi, how's it going?
Good. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, we're excited to have you. Where are you calling us from?
Yeah, so I'm in Palm City, Florida, which is about hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on traffic, north of Miami. Would be the most famous international city.
You say Miami,
also, Fort Lauderdale is nearby.
Yeah.
What's that?
I say Miami I've heard of, so that's a good landmark for me.
Yes, yeah, we'll just leave it at Miami. I know we got a global audience here, so we'll everyone knows Miami, but they may not know West Palm Beach or Stewart, Florida. But yeah.
Yeah, I regret. I don't. They sound like fabulous places, but I'm sadly unfamiliar with them. Anyway,
yes.
Let's give the audience a bit of kind of background, maybe about you and where you're coming from with your expertise. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and your e-commerce background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started selling on Amazon, dabbling in retail arbitrage in 2015. At the time, I was a high school football official. So when I say football, I mean like American style football. Sure. And so I was, black and white striped shirt, and I took a season's worth of what I earned doing that and put that into my first product, because I realized very quickly the retail arbitrage of like going into stores and trying to find things just wasn't my thing. And so fast forward a little bit, I ended up leaving my job about 3 years later to do e-commerce full time. And then I also started a YouTube channel, a podcast called Maximizing E-commerce. Started putting on some of my own virtual events like the PPC Mastery Summit, Convert More Click Summit, and others like that. And then earlier this year, Maximizing E-commerce was acquired by an agency called My Amazon Guy, which some of your audience may know of Stephen Pope or My Amazon Guy. And so I am, in addition to operating Maximizing E-commerce, I'm also the VP of marketing over at My Amazon Guy. So, and I still have my my Amazon business. And so it looks like I'm in my bedroom, but I'm actually in my office. And just over there is the warehouse that I'm sitting in. So I have a small warehouse here in Florida. So that's the short answer, so to speak, of my my e-commerce journey.
No, fantastic. Because I think that puts you squarely, or in the past version of you is squarely, I think, in the demographic of the audience for this stream. So, I mean, it seems like the e-commerce is going fairly well. What is it that you've been doing or are doing now that makes it work? I mean, especially we're quite interested in the sort of hands-on, almost practical aspects of it. Like when you're setting up an Amazon listing, how are you making that work for you and stand out from others in what's in every vertical a pretty crowded marketplace?
Yeah, it is a crowded marketplace, and I got to be honest, I was one that was like kind of late to the party with like A+ content, stuff like that. So my strategy is a little different than a lot of people. A lot of people go after hero products. I go after more kind of long tail products. So it doesn't always make sense for me to add A+ content to every listing. But Amazon actually put me in a accelerator program of some sort. So I have a rep, and he meets with me about once every 6 weeks to share things. And they have something, I forget, I think it's called a QSP score. I could be totally butchering it, but it's some score. And I was like, oh, how do I find these? Like, oh, it's an internal report. And it was basically showing me all my listings. And, I had an A for everything, but that was the old version of the calculation. And then I had like C's and D's. And there was a lot of it was because I didn't have things like A+ content. I could have done a better job with my images. So Amazon's algorithm is looking for some of these things to be in our listings more than I think we think they should. So we can probably dive more deeply into that if you'd like.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, what are these sort of hidden? I mean, I guess they're not really hidden items, but like, what are these kind of more shadowy aspects of the way that the listings are getting analyzed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the complaint everyone has had over the years is Amazon's a little bit of a black box of, they give you we have a lot of data, and there's a lot of data hiding in plain sight. Like, you don't even need tools or Amazon API or even seller account. You can figure out a lot of stuff just by looking at the platform. But then as you start digging deeper and deeper and deeper, they've got a lot of data points that they aren't sharing. It's just really, we see the tip of the iceberg when it comes to data. And they've been giving us a lot of data the last year or two, especially with advertising. But some of these like listing score things, like, I was kind of shocked. I was like, let's just pretend it really is called a QSP score.
Okay.
And so it was nothing I could go back and like find again. In fact, while he's talking, I took a screenshot of it so I could at least go back and look at it again later. So I'd have to like go find it. But basically it's things like, listings, are your listings optimized, not just for what we in the seller community might say works, but what for they in their own algorithm and internally with their teams say we should be doing, which is actually catching up to a lot of the advice that's out there.
Okay, I think, can you give some examples then of like maybe what Amazon thinks you should do? Like
yeah, so things like do you have all of your metadata? So it used to be there were certain fields that everybody would go fill out. And so now they want you to fill out as much as you can. So what I would suggest people do is download a category listings report, which everyone should have access to. But if you don't, just put in a support case and ask for access to the category listings report. It's basically like an Excel spreadsheet with a database of all of your products. And then just start looking and seeing, like, are there certain fields that there's no data in that you could figure out very quickly, like what would go in there, like your product's made out of stainless steel. And there's, something where stainless steel would go into, or, if you're looking at the screen where it shows the different options, there's like different tabs on that spreadsheet. So if you look in the tab where it's got all the different options for the different fields, just look and see, like, okay, are there any ones I could put into some of these others? Because you're giving the algorithm more data and helping it find the right people. So that's part of it, is do you have the right catalog information in the background? And then what they would also tell you is, do you have A+ content? And so it used to be kind of a nice to have, but now it's becoming more and more just an expectation. And I find myself too, like, if you're scrolling through, whether on mobile or on desktop, and, thinking of myself as a customer here, you can pick up visually a lot more. And so are your images, creating a brand story. And there were things that also he was telling me with like main images, like sprinkling in things that used to be kind of considered gray hat. Like he was telling me just to do, like basically like, you still have to be careful of what you put in your main image, but he was suggesting having some text in the main image, which used to be one of those things like just don't do. Or he was saying, have your packaging have text that conveyed things that people might use to make buying decisions. Because it's almost like they're trying to replicate more and more of what it feels like at a store. And they look at things like the main image and A+ content and some of the secondary images. So your design has a lot more to do with an optimized listing than before. We used to just think like, oh yeah, just make sure you got a lot of keywords in your title and you're good. It's becoming a lot more, the algorithm is becoming smarter. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it's interesting that that they're now recommending things because they definitely used to be pretty anti text and images, and
it was. But some of it you can get away with more if it's like on packaging. So let's just say, and again, once upon a time it used to be no packaging. Now he's like suggesting packaging, and he even went so far as to say with packaging. So let's just pretend this book here is the package. So instead of just having it flat in front, to have it tilted so people can see more of not just the front part, but they can see like the sides. And so he was suggesting making sure you have that, so people get more of a sense of like the depth of the product packaging.
The thing.
So packaging is becoming more and more of a thing, whereas that used to be kind of considered gray hat unless you're in supplements, because you wouldn't just show powder. So they're wise to, at the end of the day, they want sales. And so if they see something is going to help conversions, then and help click-through rate, or ultimately help buyers make a decision, then they seem to be moving more towards that direction. Now, as we also know with Amazon, you also have to tread lightly, because just because the left hand said to do something doesn't mean the right hand's not going to slap you for it. So
yeah. That's true. I mean, I think it's fascinating that, the point about the metadata, actually, because of course that's the thing that the page doesn't display. But really, when you see all this people trying to brute force their way through by slapping every keyword into a product title or something, that's the information that should be going into the back end, right? Are there other things, actually? And is the fact that Amazon just gives you this, I think, is pretty interesting as well. Are there other things that like you could just be asking them for and they'll give you?
That's an interesting thing. So I wish we could get access to some of these like listing scores, especially when they're, grading your listing. I've never had anyone say that they attempted to put in a support case to say, hey, can I get my listing quality score or whatever they call it? Maybe it's a LQS, or I don't know. Now that I think through that, like quality score, something, I don't know, whatever the quality scoring that they're doing, if they give it to you, you never know, you might get someone on the catalog team or whatever team to give you that information. But a couple other things you could do as well is, so you mentioned back in keywords. At My Amazon Guy, one of the things we figured out was that everyone has been saying like it's gospel that you get 250 characters in the back end. Well, it's technically not 250 characters, it's 250 bytes. And so 250 bytes sounds like it's about 250 characters, but generally it might be more like 270, 280-ish. So you can get through more characters because spaces don't count. And of course, make sure you're not putting in commas. But assuming everyone knows that, spaces don't count for bytes, and not every letter is a full 1 byte. So you can go on, just like you might go into like a letter count online, you might look up byte count, and then you can see how many bytes the text that you're going to have is going to be. And then you can put that into your backend keywords. So you might be able to, put in another few extra words. And then another place you can put information that helps the algorithm find you is in the alt text of your A+ content images. So you can put text in there, which is an SEO thing that like you could do like on your own website. And Amazon, hadn't given us that ability to do before with like, just the regular images on your listing. But in A+ content, you can put that, and that can help you rank as well. And so we've tested it. We're putting like Spanish keywords in alt text, and then suddenly we rank higher for Spanish keywords because they're in
like
the alt text.
So you have an English language listing, but it's effectively bilingual kind of thing in terms of.
Yeah, exactly. So, I would say, if you put Spanish keywords in your listing, you're not going to like double your sales overnight, but it's like anything. It's just little incremental changes you make can help you, rank better, or for the algorithm better find customers who might look for certain words, or if there's slang terms, or, I'm in Florida, the way people describe something in Florida, we might say Coke, whereas someone else might say soda, and someone else might say pop, for, carbonated beverages. Yeah. Well, your product may have variations of what people would use, and you might not want to use that real estate in your title or your back-end keywords, but you could sprinkle that into your listings as well to help you rank. And so what it comes down to, I would say, is help people make an informed decision with, your A+ content and your images, because there's people like my wife who, will go through every single review, and everything you say, that you're going to go through with a fine-tooth comb. And then there's people like me that are like, it's TLDR. It looks nice, and so you kind of have to think of it as you're serving both audiences. And then there's going to be some people that are in the middle that are just going to scan through. If they like what they see in their scan, then they're going to spend the time to read through it, especially if it's a product that is not so much of an impulse purchase. If they're buying a mattress, they want to know a lot more about it than if they're buying an $8 calculator or whatever.
Yeah, sure thing. All right. Well, I mean, thanks, Kevin. That's some fascinating insights there, and some things I think many people won't have even considered. I mean, actually, even just the idea of asking the staff for help is like a thing that I think is not obvious to the e-commerce beginner. If people want to find out more from you, or indeed learn from you, where's the best place to find you on the internet or get in touch with you?
Sure. I host about once a quarter a virtual summit myself. So they can always go to maximizingecommerce.com/wait, WAIT, and then get on the wait list for that. And then also at My Amazon Guy, they can just go to myamazonguy.com. If they're not subscribed to the My Amazon Guy YouTube channel, they should. And I, from time to time, will host live streams on that channel. So lots of fun stuff happening out there. It's a crazy world with lots of changes. And so I give you guys kudos for putting this on to help sellers, learn what are the latest things so they can take their businesses to the next level.
Fantastic. Kevin, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So that just about wraps it up for another episode of Buyer Fireside Chat. Our thanks, of course, to Carina, Kevin, and David for their time and their expert insights. And thanks to you too for watching. Do stay tuned to our social media channels because we have another episode coming up pretty soon, all about supplier relationships, making them and maintaining them. And of course, don't forget to click the link in the description to register for the upcoming Sourcing Festival on globalsources.com. Until next time, thanks very much.